Um, Hi guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Boyan. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Pranav, how's it going, mate?
Hey, hi Pranav. It's great to have you
Excellent.
here.
Yeah, I'm more excited, I think, than both of you guys.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, so it's good that our paths have finally crossed. I'm super excited to hear what's happening in the country's specific areas of Holochain. Boyan had previously been tweeting about the Turkish community. I know we had our Chinese AMA recently as well. And I know that there was a hackathon in India and some of the team were over there. I know David Atkinson went there. I know Matthew Schutte went there. And I think he may even still be there. So I'd love to catch up on everything that's happening over there. I lived in Asia for about 5 years, but I have not been to India. So I'll be taking a back seat, I think, and just asking all of the noob questions about what's going on over there and see what you guys think.
Yeah, great. I think also, I would love to hear exactly something about the possibility and the growth of the community and possibly the ecosystem of application based on Holochain in India. And I think also, Pranav, you're quite familiar also with, you travel quite often to Dubai. You went also with some people from the team there, if I'm not wrong. Maybe you can share something about yourself, of course, and about your experience with Holochain.
Sure. So I think let me start with sharing my a brief background about myself, and then go into share about my journey with crypto, and then subsequently how Holochain happened and why Holochain happened, and why I'm so excited about Holochain. I think that could be a good way to build it up. So I largely come from I would say manufacturing and renewable energy was my earlier experience, and that's when I started appreciating operations, environment, and so on and so forth. And then subsequently, post MBA, financial services was my focus for like almost a decade or more, let's say 12 to 13 years. And I've straddled across private equity, lending, asset management, offshore asset management, as well as domestic asset management and insurance business. When way back in 2017, early 2017 is when I got curious about crypto, because I think that's when the market broke out from a very closed community to actually taking a center stage. And then somebody told me that this is not a geeky stuff anymore. This is serious money, and this is financial services. And I was like, how did I miss it so far? So the next thing I knew was I was meeting with a family office that had invested into the largest crypto exchange in India at that particular point in time, ZepPay. And I was talking to their founder, and I had like a list of questions. So I was doing like a rapid fire conversation. So this is not a rapid fire conversation, but that was a rapid fire conversation. I must say that the kind of passion he had, and he has still, he shared, with me amazing insights. And I was like, this is it. This is going to become big. This may take some time, but this is going to stay. Because what I really liked about that piece, cryptocurrencies and I would say Bitcoin and this entire space at that particular point in time, was that globalization was a concept which was in books, spoken about, maybe outsourcing. Maybe it was about people traveling into different parts of the world, trading and commerce happening with tariffs and restrictions. But there was no common monetary system. Definitely US dollar was something which was either because of hegemony or because of certain economic strength. US dollar became a dominant currency in the globe, but there was no currency of people as such. It was missing completely in that space. And I was like, something will take this space at some point. I'm not saying that Bitcoin will take that space, but something will take that space. And that particularly got me excited. So Nick, I think that was a good one, by the way. So
yeah, we have chickens, obviously.
So, I was really excited that, globalization can finally arrive, because without a social and commerce and social system, and along with the economic system, it's not going to become real. So now we have a loosely connected economic system in place. We call it cryptocurrency market, or various payment mechanisms, right? The second part is participative economy. Now, Kickstarter and others, Indiegogo, like we experienced in case of Holochain as well. Somewhere I realized that this is going to become bigger, because individuals wanted to participate, but they didn't have the financial strength to participate in these large opportunities. And definitely crowdfunding, or let's say, participative economy is going to become extremely large. And that's what I see happening in cryptocurrency space. So what people see as a speculative bubble is also unleashing of people's desire to participate in opportunities which are globally present, right? So these two things, in my view, are definitely were going to grow. And then I realized that, then I was in Bitcoin, then I was into various, projects early on, dominantly into blockchain, focused on smart contracts, few dApps, and had a good run from 2017 to 2018. And then I realized that blockchain is overheated, because my engineering mind and hat, and my financial services, hat, and also my own experience with VC investing and investing into equities for like almost 10 years, for almost a decade, gave me a sense that this is not sustainable. Like whatever blockchain has to promise is not going to come by in a manner that people expect it to. Definitely blockchain has a valuable use case, and there are use cases in which blockchain is extremely effective and efficient. And my own experience in my career was that anything which is like a P2P network, and which is extremely powerful in terms of keeping an individual insulated and anonymous enough, right? At the same time, creating possibilities for that individual to build, communicate, and be in communion with other individuals and communities is going to unleash a huge potential in terms of the applications that we have not seen earlier. And then in that spirit, I was lucky enough to get, Holochain caught my attention at that particular point. And my own experience in investing has been that this is not only about technology, this is about the mindset. So what really also caught my attention was the mindset of the team, which has been into works for the past, let's say 12 to 14 years, right? Working on various aspects like Septer, metacurrency, and these are like, such powerful concepts. And in many ways, if like sort of, I summarize my earlier experience in the environment, getting a sense of the environment, very early on, and then understanding financial services and what was the weakness in corporate space and financial services as a whole, and what's happening in cryptocurrency space and what I felt disconnected with. I felt this was my point of arrival. This was a space. Holochain, in many ways, in my mind, was like a technology plus the team, plus I would say the kind of, the community that came around in terms of making it happen. Like I got to know Boyan, extremely early, and we were having a conversation not about when Moon, when Lambo. The conversation was about how we can make this happen. And I was like, this is what will bring about globalization and participative economy in true sense. If this DNA flourishes, no matter what. And that's been that's been the starting point from ICO. My journey started off. I started off as another community member, as another investor. To share also, I'm also managing partner of a crypto fund by the name Authority Capital. I'm also advisor to a few projects. I'm also helping STO fund, because I believe whatever excesses of previous 1 year has been will be solved by better governance and better compliance. May not be better regulation, but definitely better compliance. Ideally, this compliance, if it could be self-compliance, great, but I think human beings are very bad at self-compliance. So there has to be some regulatory, element to it also, It's like carrot and stick. It works best. So
sorry to interrupt. On that point, I just have to Yeah, I'd love to know what you think about the compliance with KYC at the moment. It seems to be a bit of a hot topic, and Holochain released an article about it today. You said that humans aren't very good at regulatory compliance, and what do you think just in general about having to go through the KYC process as hosts and as kind of part of the verification process, and the lack of anonymity on the Holochain network and these kind of things? Like, do you have a particular thought about that compliance aspect of it?
To be very honest about it, I like KYC. I have a very different view about it, and I'm sure there are enough people who will have a very different view. They want to be anonymous, and they want to do different things, in a network. But my view is that if you want to integrate, the adoption story will happen when you integrate with the real world, right?
Yep.
And in real world, KYC and anti-money laundering is at center stage, because that is what makes the entire world work right now. Now the question can be to what degree of KYC will be prudent enough, and I think that article came out really well, depending upon your association with the network in terms of what is your and what kind of applications you're getting involved with, and accordingly the KYC will vary, right? And people, and for example, experience in exchanges, our limits increase as we do more KYC, right? So I think there'll be such mechanisms, and I think Art spoke about badges and stuff, So I think it will make KYC very exciting. I don't think people want to be anonymous if they want to do bigger stuff. In any case, you can't be. Like, for example, if I want to borrow money, right? Let's say I want to go to a bank, right? I need to have my 3 years of income statement and audited, that to tax filing and all that stuff. So, I'm sure, everyone wants to build a house. Everyone wants to buy a car. Everyone wants to live a life. Although, we are, citizens of the new internet, but our life, happens in these, I would say in the real world. So I have a very pro stance as far as, KYC is concerned. I think largely the backlash came from the point that people are experiencing this baseless, or you can say useless, KYC from banks, which are asking for all the documents all the time, and it is getting so painful. And they were this will become another bureaucratic organization. And I don't think Holochain team at any point in time, is pro-centralized or organization which are bureaucratic. They definitely want to liberalize. But they want to be on the right side of the regulation. That's the way to flourish the network, and that is the way we can engage with the real world. Yeah, Centro.
Yeah, indeed. I see it that many people are kind of romanticizing the way crypto could go mainstream, and the funny thing is that now, actually for many people, 2018 was a very not successful year for crypto, but from certain perspective, it was very successful, because basically we start seeing it from a bit more grounded point of view, and there was a lot of building happening and in that space. And if we would like to have mainstream adoption, we need to play by the rules.
Yeah.
And some of these rules, I see a lot of people in crypto just really romanticizing that it's all about anonymity. In my opinion, personally, I think it's more about transparency than anonymity, and achieving, like, through crypto. I see that actually the users could get finally a seat on the same table as the governments and the multinationals, and that is the big difference. And from that perspective, I think what Holochain will have to offer will be really completely revolutionary. And KYC is part of it. You can't. I shared the other day, yesterday on Twitter. I was ordering yesterday from an online shop pampers for my kids. I had to go through certain level of KYC just to order pampers. And from another perspective, just using your credit or debit card online, you share much more data than some of the KYC required. So it's been a little bit, it's time to realize that, we have to play by certain rules if we would like to have man adoption, and perhaps this won't be like for some people from the community, but this is the way to really go mainstream, adopt it, because there's no way to go around that. It's just simply the way.
Yeah, I think there's maybe like a mistaken viewpoint that whatever the new decentralized internet looks like means that no one's going to have any of your data and it's going to be fully anonymous. But I mean, it's hard because like Holo's been very upfront that it's not going to be anonymous, but then people are thinking that like any kind of data means mismanagement of data and it's a third party and it's like a centralized structure. And then we start getting into like conversations about 1984 and why we're even using this system when it's supposed to be decentralized. But it's sort of crossing of ideologies or something to that effect, because we know that like what Holochain is creating are things like Holo Vault. So where you fully, like your data is managed and safe, and you're in control of your own data, and it's agent centric, and you get to choose how you interact on the internet by choosing like where you want that data to be and how, and it's on your terms versus a third party organization just using it wherever they want. And so I think that kind of that shift from, a third party to the agent centricity is kind of getting a little bit lost there. And I'm from the gambling industry as well, so I'm fully aware of KYC and anti-money laundering. I'm not sure if people are aware. You will be, Pranav, about the difficulty of opening up like international bank accounts and anti-money laundering laws and all of this kind of thing. Like I've had to jump through so many hoops just to get things done, like all kinds of regulatory things, and all you want to do is open a bank account. So it's getting more and more difficult, and I think it's just getting lost a little bit in what Holochain is and the benefits of it and why you're using it, and sort of this regulatory framework of it means it's centralized and it means that some government entity, FBI, CIA, is going to be controlling your data and shutting you down or something. And I think that people sort of are missing a few links in there. That's my opinion.
And there is another. It's almost it's almost comic point that the way we use internet and all those platforms at the moment, on many of them, there is this kind of very on the surface assumption that you're anonymous, while they're harvesting all your possible data from your contacts to your location, everything, perhaps even recording your conversations without your knowledge. But you're anonymous. And what Holochain has to offer, in my view, is like 180 degrees. There'll be transparency, there'll be this knowledge who is using the application, but the data won't be harvested. So it's like it's kind of like a funny shift, which we need to really kind of dive a little bit below the surface to understand, because also who wants to have internet which is something like 4chan? I mean, I personally don't. So
Mm-hmm.
And I see that many people, perhaps from the Holochain community, understanding that might be disappointed. But I also see that like a huge amount of people who never heard of Holochain, this will be the gate like towards them being, start using it and an application being built. Because we talk about, we're not so much about the end customer, because we are at such an early stage, and we both with Nick are part of Earth. So, we're building a Holochain, and we need people to start building applications. Also, like Holo host will be nothing without applications. So this is where we are.
Yeah, and mainstream adoption, like in every country, means different things. Like every country is going to have a different regulatory environment. And coming from the financial world, Pranav, you'd be pretty aware of what's going on there. And you can't have like a one a one system fits all. It has to have that built-in flexibility as well. But I would love to get back on the topic of India, Pranav. And did you go to the hackathon? Like, were you with the team, or can you sort of update us on what's happening in India?
So I think, let me step back and share a perspective about India, which I briefly shared in the chat. So I think India is a land of dichotomies, and you have been in Asia, Nick, earlier, and Boyan has been in India for, let's say, I think almost a year or so.
Yeah,
I mean, you'll find, this is like a huge country, both from a geographical span as well as, from a populace. And this country, on one end, you will see that, the beauty of, India as a country is that it is also a source of, many profound things. Let's say yoga, for example, right? At the same time, it is also a melting pot of many cultures. Like pretty much every culture that came into India actually got assimilated. So there was no rejection. There was only assimilation that happened. So there's another aspect to it. So on other side, you see abject poverty, and on the other side, you see richness, wherein the most, I would say the richest, person in the country, he spends almost $100 million on his, daughter's marriage, and invites and gets the entire top deck of the Bollywood to serve food. So I'm sure such a wedding has not happened even in US also. So this is one aspect. On the other side, you see there's a large section of people who have been traders for like years and years together. So if you've read history, the Silk Route, which connected China on one side and let's say Europe on the other side. And now there is a huge, a space which has been created for enterprising youngsters who have become developers. So India is one of the largest outsourcing hubs in the world, right? On the other hand, you see that, there is people outside hear about discrimination, but at the same time, you see that people here, when you, come to India, there's this huge amount of, I would say, involvement in terms of ensuring that good happens to other people. This concept of karma and various things is like very strong here. So the point I wanted to make is that there's a huge, there is an India which is visible from outside, and then there is a huge underbelly which has to be discovered, and you can only discover it literally on the ground. And very surprisingly, this is what I shared with David, Matt, and Eric. And I must say that that's when I speak about mindset. So one is technology of Holochain, second is the mindset. When I mentioned this to all three of them, they absorbed it. And the next thing I knew is, that they were like, we want to discover India. That was the response. So it was not about how many meetups, how many developers, whom can we meet? Is he the most important person? How much business can he get? Is he the guy building the largest application or whatever it is, like various other projects too? This is about, we want to absorb India. So I think this was unspoken word and also spoken word in many ways. And all three of them were coming to India for the first time. So I just want to emphasize on these things, before I sort of, give you the answer, the real answer, Nick, because I think it's important for the audience here to understand what the team is all about. So imagine this, that they were stepping into this, diverse country for the first time, right? And three of them, they just landed here. And the next thing I spoke to David, for example, even Eric and Matt, was like, they were like, I mean, we wanted to be here, and we trusted you, and we trusted the rest of the people, volunteers who were there, and that's why we are here, right? And this itself speaks that, they are seekers in true sense who want to discover pathways for growth, for self and for others. And I'm sure this will have a huge bearing on Holochain ecosystem as well in times to come. The other aspect, that I observed is that, they were all in it for, their own, I would say, self-growth as well. So, they, in their own way, they visited, various, places of, spiritual significance. While they come from different cultures, this itself was extremely heartwarming for somebody who has been a native, like me. Now so this is something which I want to speak about the qualities. There is another quality which I want to bring is that unlike other projects, when the teams visit India or any other country, and since I'm connected with the space, they always land up staying in 5-star hotels and looking at, meetups in 5-star, hotels, right? All three of them, they were staying in Airbnb. So what I could sense is that, this is not about being a spendthrift. This is about frugality, and this is about the culture of spending the investor dollar in the right place at the right time, right? They were extremely sensitive to this aspect, that, we have to nurture the roots and we have to grow this. So that's in that context, they were sensing, but they were not like, really spending. And I must say that, from the perspective of the kind of response, that overall we got, I think only E3M has got it, in past in India, and that too E3M has a consensus, has a setup wherein they have an office, they have like a footprint in, let's say, major cities, and they have been paying and doing meetups. And in case of Holochain, it was all organic. So we had few things, which happened. And one is, we had one of the largest YouTubers in India, Shiv, capturing, so doing a live AMA with, Matt, and then subsequently Q&A session, with the community. So this is the first thing that happened. The next thing was there were two private meetups. They happened, respectively with, Sacred Capital and Marlin Protocol. So they're invitees. So Sacred Capital has been into the space of, I would say, in impact investing, for a fairly long time. So they have a huge bunch of, thinkers and people who believe in impact, rallying around them for a fairly long time. They've also built a reputation system on Holochain, right? And wherein they're thinking of building applications, especially with governments, government bodies and semi-government bodies.
They have a great 2018 wrap up if anyone's interested in reading it. They did a fantastic article basically summing up what they did in 2018, Sacred Capital. It's a good read.
Yeah, that's right. So they're good guys, absolutely. And Marlin Protocol, they're building a base layer to scaling any network, large network. So, so this is another, so they also organized a meetup, with Holochain. And then there was this 2-day session wherein we figured out what are the long-term imperatives of Holochain and how we can, work on specific themes in India. So we were together with Illumine Knowledge Resources. This is a think tank, and they've done very large interventions with, large banks like State Bank of India, with, let's say, larger, large insurance companies, large mutual fund companies, even the large oil company like a PPCL, they've done interventions. We're like, how we can do stuff in a grounds up, right? With Holochain. So this is, like 1.5, 2-day session. And then finally there was this large meetup, which I think some 70 people, turned up, and Eric was there. Sorry, I missed, that, Eric also stepped out and he went to Hyderabad. Nakshay Agrawal of also organized a meetup of, let's say, about 30 odd developers and crypto enthusiasts, who came together. So I must say that, all of this got organized in like 2-3 days. People just huddled up, they just together, they just made it happen. Okay. And my own sense of, something like this, happening so unpredictably well is, I think, the intent that, Holochain team brings to the table, and also their ability to, because of the technology and because of their body of work for the past 13, 14 years, how this intent can be translated into real world use and applications. So I think this is what got everyone together, and pretty much everyone who came got excited by it. Everyone shared, feedback with me separately. I'll be meeting few more people. And the reason I'm saying I'll be meeting few more people is because I was not there in any of these meetups, right? Except for the 2-day Illumine, session that was there. And it's so amazing that, people still, did what they did, because I was, spending more time with David and understanding the philosophy, and also, spending time, with him, in a couple of, amazing places, in southern part of the country, right? So I think from the perspective of all three of them, I think this was a good visit, the first of the many visits, I suppose. We were lucky to have them, with us. To me, it was inspiring. I'm being very open here, meeting David, Eric, and Matt. I'm not sure how many people who are going to be listening to this seeing this, know about this, but they're extremely warm, extremely accessible people. They have zero air about them. Their focus, you have.
Yeah, no, I think also Nick, going on hackathons and meeting up the team, that's how he committed and has begin building him on Holochain since even prior to the ICO, and that was my experience in Amsterdam. And you mentioned something which, in my opinion, especially I've been a part of blockchain team building on Ethereum. Actually, it was kind of like a spoke of consensus, and the difference is like the intention is also there, and also if you go to I've seen some other projects that basically their idea was like, okay, this is happening. What is our idea? And let's just do something about it, and do an ICO and start setting up a team, and these hot words like the very trendy decentralization. But my experience with Holochain is like they already had this vision and they've been working towards it for such a long time. You can go even Matthew have shared his story that for a while he was been living in his own van, like camper van, and renting out his apartment just to set up to prepare it before even they go for ICO. So those people, they really have this long-term view. What you said, they didn't go to 5-star hotels. Working with another projects, I literally told him, I don't want to fly business. I had a 1-hour flight. I don't want business. Can I book my own hotels? I don't like 4 or 5-star hotels. I just need a room to sleep for a few hours. I don't want to be paying like crazy amount of money from investors. It's madness, and I see this integrity being there, and not as like being there as kind of like image or marketing stunt. It's just natural for them, and this is very inspiring. And it's a very subtle thing. That's why I was also recommending people to watch some interviews with Art and with Matthew, just to see the conviction in what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. But how it's not about marketing something, it's not about selling. They don't even, in a very healthy sense, don't care if the token will be like jumping up. Like they look the long-term view. That's why this is for investors, not for speculators, at least at this stage. But also I wanted to share, because you mentioned I've been a couple of years in India. I mean, I went 7-8 times down there. And from my perspective, as kind of Westerner, even though I come from Eastern Europe, so when I went to India first time, I was like, oh wow, that's how, like, that's a little bit like home. I was already living in the West, so. But from certain perspective in India, almost everybody's an entrepreneur. Everybody, you see people starting businesses like kids selling newspapers, and it's just like it's a very vibrant world. And if you haven't been there, there's no way you don't know what I'm talking about. Some other East Asian countries, of course, but there's something extra, in my opinion, of course, perhaps personal view.
And I just want to add, Boyan, here, let's say when you come to India, and I'm sure this is true for even Eastern Europe also.
Yeah.
The basic unit of the society is family, and that is why it is so resilient. So the family, and in many ways these families, they come together in whatever shapes and sizes to form a community. And Holochain, since it is going to be a peer-to-peer, it is a peer-to-peer technology with decentralized hosting and stuff, and many applications. It just perfectly fits into societies and culture like these, wherein the family wants to express himself. Let's say family was a he, or let's say her, for example, let's say, so let's say family wants to express, let's say itself, let's say, okay, I'm not giving it a living context. So now it needs a technology which is nimble enough, and it is almost organism. Like organism. I'm sorry about it. Let's say an organism. Right?
No, when you go that direction as well.
India's big into tantra, right?
Yeah,
Sacred sexuality and all this kind of stuff.
So this is like an organism. Let's say a technology which is like an organism. If it can connect and it can give expression to a community, I think the technology is going to succeed. And the various centralized technology have not been able to give space for human potential to be unraveled. And if Holochain can be that technology, and my sense is it has that potential. It is going to be massive.
It is about local communities and also another experience. I've been in villages in the mountains when there is like 2 hours a day electricity, but 24/7 Wi-Fi or internet available. Like they run on batteries that are charged by solar, and when they have 2 hours electricity, they charge them. But also, you mentioned something about the family kind of being very important in that culture. If you trace down, there's this joke that one of the best exports of India is the CEOs. And if you see like some of the major companies, the CEOs are like Indian. This has a lot to do with family and those values, which are like really intrinsic in that culture. That is so much underappreciated. Like even in the West, people like, like parents decide who's going to be your spouse or like husband and stuff. But there is something we really miss, and it's very important. This kind of local community, these values are there. And I think what Holochain, with this agent-centric based applications that will be emerging, would be really good match between those,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also the... like when we start talking about things like regenerative food systems and the commons and things at a granular microcosm community level, the ability to get a working model in say somewhere like a local community in India, and then being able to fork off these systems into these different uses, whether it be democratic or food systems or financial systems like micro lending or fundraising or whatever it may be. That kind of granularity and flexibility in being able to fork off these living, working systems. I'm interested to see how that plays in somewhere like India, where even though I haven't been, it feels like there's all these different, like way different kinds of communities and systems that are in place at a state or a national level. And because there's all like so many different levels of rules or ways how things are done differently, if we're able to get a working system and have the flexibility to design it how it works in your local community, that could be a way to see rapid adoption in a way in which is not bulky, and you have to, kind of again go back to that one size fits all blockchain solution. I'm just sort of riffing here, but that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when you have such a diverse culture as you do in India.
It is. In a certain perspective, is even decentralized in a way that we are all aware, if we talk about religion and spirituality, that like spirituality kind of is really like springs out of India and that culture, simply because, in India, there's like millions of gods. In the West, like we have, like with this monolithic religions, we have so much problems and all these wars. Like you go to a place like Jerusalem and you have like two religions that are fighting for the same temple, basically. It's like really madness. And in India, you started with that, Pranav, that it's like everything is assimilated. It's not rejected. It is a very fundamentally kind of like distributed culture where everything is welcomed. It makes its own version, but it's assimilated. It's not really rejected. It's very interesting how that will work out in the upcoming years when, we're seeing this exponential growth of decentralization kind of movement and applications and businesses and the whole paradigm shift that is happening. How that will work out down there, in my opinion, it will be one of the best places where we might take root.
No, absolutely. And Boyan, I think you put it across very well that the social ambience is just perfect for something like Holochain, let's say in India, right? And so that context is context in my mind is like a perfect fit. In many ways, the complexity which is there, it gives many micro opportunities. If they can be capitalized, they can be like an incubator for rest of the world. Because the rest of the world has various shades of these applications, which are like the societies are more structured in that sense, like an amoeba, right? The second aspect is economic. So various countries that we called as developed countries, they have grown because of largely based on fossil fuel and natural resources, as a backbone. I don't think that luxury is available to countries which are developing and that want to become developed anymore. They need to find their own ways which are more effective and efficient, right?
Exactly.
And I think technology will be a very big enabler for developing economies which have the right ingredients in terms of the human resource. I'm just talking about human resource as an ingredient. It has a layer of technology, which is wherein there is an ability to collaborate and contribute. This can catapult the society to the next level. So that is another stuff, from an economic perspective, I'm bullish on, because they don't have the luxury of resources, whether it is financial resources or natural resources, to make that shift. So that's another reason why I believe something like Holochain and these distributed technologies, wherein even, let's say, somebody who's sitting in, let's say, small village, a mountain, like the Boyan, where you were saying that, and just is like the smartest kid in that particular town, can just make an application, monetize it, right? Today there is such a big entry barrier to make something like this happen, and this could unleash human and economic potential.
Exactly, like this distributed technology for some of the people in the West is just some nice future possible alternativity, or perhaps a good way to invest in the future. But for some people, like in India, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, this technology will make all the difference between them being part of the world's economy or not. As simple as that. It's about basically, and we talk about, like, I'm going to throw some trendy terminology here, but like the unbanked, for example. But that just translates to simple people who have the ability to be part of this world economy. And this will be, it's such a business model that everybody, even some people like in the West, will be, will have shortcut access to those people. We talk about more fair trade, talk about empowering those people on the ground, not like the Amazons and I don't know who is, like the Alibabas of the world, but really empowering the people down there on the ground. And this technology will make all the difference. And how do you kind of like make the bridge? Because of course, for those people, you ideally, as you said, would be to go on the ground, just meet up and build applications. I know there is someone building something in that context in Thailand on Holochain. I met that first hackathon in Amsterdam, and we're having some conversations. I'm not going to mention about, because I think they're kind of still building in stealth mode on Holochain, but I think soon, especially once Holo network goes live and Rust is there, and we're going to hear more about projects like that. And what also Nick said is very important, because then later they can be forked and like go into a little bit more on a more local level and be kind of formulated for each kind of community /
Yes.
is very important. Modular.
So one more thing which I wanted to add, Boyan, here is, I think there is a large opportunity in businesses, small businesses space also. Because I just want to, heed, what Nick was mentioning about, producer token and about, just organic. So let's say organic businesses are right now not the mainstream businesses for various reasons. In many ways, the organic produce at times is more expensive. but it is also fad in certain geographies. But now it is becoming mainstream as people are realizing the benefit of using organic food, right? And building organic supply chain in many ways. But the thing is that how many of these businesses have access to, let's say, communities, let's say large enough markets, have access to financing, right? How many businesses now, organic is still one space. I'm seeing there are a lot of businesses which are like ethical businesses. There's a lot of businesses which are like small businesses. They don't have the economies of scale.
Intentional businesses, yeah.
Yeah, and so on and so forth. There are many such category of businesses which the world needs, but they're not able to find manifestation. So now the question is that how do we do this? And definitely centralized organization will always push businesses which are like higher margin or higher growth or both, right? And they will eventually, not be able to, put forth businesses which have, let's say, higher social impact, while higher margins and higher growth may follow, right? And this is the nature of capitalism in many ways. So a large platform like a Holochain, or let's say, can give an expression to a lot of these, businesses that want to basically, see that, how they can truly, come together, and at the same time take the benefit of whatever unique stuff that they've built so far. So I met, I come from SME background as well, so I built an SME business earlier, and what I realized is that these businesses require hand holding, but if you can help them to bring down their cost and bring forth tools which they can utilize, they can grow very fast and create a lot of, so it can create employment, it can create financial benefit for the financiers, and so on and so forth. So that's another big opportunity I see, especially in the developing countries, which is India, possibly China. I'm sure in Eastern Europe, I'm sure in South America, Africa as well.
Yeah, and just so people know what you're talking about, before we started recording, I was talking about the farm here and developing things in line with what Producers Market and Just One Organics are doing, and looking to create products here, like to do with bees and mycelium and these things these regenerative ecosystems which can create more flows of value for the land here, and what, like, putting the intention in and what the land wants and all these kind of things. And like, I think what Pranav was getting at is these extra layers of value which are now visible through Holochain and through the supply chain mechanisms, is that now that we've got all of these labels like sustainable, ethical, organic, biodynamic, vegan friendly, like all of these things, and it feels like the direction that we're going now is that consumers are going to be able to see all of these extra added layers of value, and they're demanding it. So there are these opportunities now for these small to medium-sized businesses in India and all around the world, where people are demanding that the stuff that they eat or grow is sustainable and ethical and heirloom seeds and helps nature and is creating biodiversity and local jobs and locally sourced and is the highest nutritional value, is like within 100 kilometers of their home and was picked a few days ago, or whatever the criteria is. These forms of value are now going to be able to be visible, and so we're going to see all of these opportunities up where someone in Africa might create a local system, and then a small business owner in India can fork it, create their own localized version of that, and create their own value. So it feels like that the exponential growth can come is through the visibility in these layers of information. The way that Art explained it, if I can recall it correctly, you're able to see things from a 360-degree view versus having just one true answer. And because you can see these flows, these current seas, it's able to be laid on And that's what's exciting to me. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm one of those. I'm trying to bridge these worlds here on the property here by getting involved in being an early adopter of these other people building on Holochain, by creating these regenerative ecosystems on the land, in the soil, with the flora and fauna and all of that, and then see what naturally wants to come through, and then being able to match up with like-minded people through these marketplaces and through the Holochain community, where they're going to be able to see and understand those forms of value and attribute real value to it, and get involved in the ecosystem. Whereas before, you might go to just a centralized supermarket chain or whatever, and it might be organic, but what we're already finding is that organic's pretty corrupt, in the sense of, okay, it can be organic, but they've imported all of their ingredients from overseas, and they've got a monoculture farm, and the biodiversity isn't there, and it's actually not doing a whole lot of good for the ecosystem that it's in. But you're going to the shop and buying something that's organic, but it's actually not on a bigger sort of bird's eye view of the ecosystem. It's actually not a positive. So yeah, that's kind of it's interesting to hear you talk about that, Pranav. It's really, really exciting to me.
So Nick, this is another opportunity I see thanks to Holochain. I think there is a set of people who believe in sustainable living. I'm just coining a term. It means nothing, in many ways, but I think we all get the sense. The idea is that people who believe in let's say nature and commerce going together, they are coming together on a scale which is unprecedented. In many ways, Holochain, if it can be that network of people who trust each other, I think the commerce and who have the capability to make this happen. I'm sure the commerce in true spirit of globalization, which is in sync with the nature, will happen. So I'm very excited about it, and I'm really excited that hApps is taking this initiative of bringing these voices to the fore. So these conversations are not about how much money we will make. This is about what will be the total value creation which will happen, and how sustainable we'll be as, let's say, as a human species, so to say. Very few people are having this conversation. I'm so excited to, have a conversation with, both of you. I wish both of you lots of success, because in success of both of you lies success of humanity. And I'm sure this is one of the many conversations that we'll have.
Oh yeah.
And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this, conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, brother. It's been a real pleasure. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about the intention of the team. And to some people that may or may not be important, but to me that's very important. It's as critical as it gets, because this energy that's coming through, like behind the intention, is what are they calling up? What are they singing up? What are they creating, and on what level? Anyone can create a system like a currency where it's heavily weighted towards the ICO or the early investors, and can make some material wealth. But this is about something much deeper and much truer, and something much more in line with nature and humanity. And as these new things are coming through, and we'll get to these on future podcasts, I'm sure, Boyan, like things like 5G and artificial intelligence, and like the impact that it's going to have on human health and our telecommunications industry and mesh networks and all of these things, like what's going to happen when, humans aren't at the center of like the goodness of what's created. It's like we're being extracted from versus something that's like for us. And it's a real, it's really refreshing to hear you talk about it, Pranav, in such a sort of cultural, spiritual, global country sense, because, like I've only heard a little bit about what's happening in India, but you hear about like the government semi-banning things and you know, the gray area of the financial crypto space, and you know, you talk about like the different sort of layers of culture and all that, and it feels like it feels like good things are going to happen, and it's cool that you're on the ground level because you're in it and you're able to share it with us. So yeah, it's yeah. I hope we can have some more talks like this, and you've got the gear to go with it, mate.
Yeah.
Hey, great talking to you, and I would like to thank everybody who is listening and viewing this, and we're going to continue having those conversations. And thank you, guys. It's been really inspirational to meet you and see how, you know, meet like-minded people and also extra perspectives. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, guys, I had a great time.
See you.
All right, peace out, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. See you. Bye-bye.